Hello everyone, Jay Warden here, and today we will be looking at the episode Where No One Has Gone Before, where the crew go to some fantastical places and imagine mundane thoughts. Remember, spoilers are ahead, otherwise sit back and enjoy. The Enterprise has linked up with the USS Fearless, which is transferring over a specialist called Kaczynski who will improve their warp drive. Apparently, he's already done good work on the Fearless and other ships, but Riker isn't convinced, and both he and Data, having looked over his research, have concluded that it's all bullshit. Once on board, we immediately discover Kaczynski is a complete twat and wants to know why Picard sent his errand boy Riker to greet him instead of Picard himself. Riker introduces everyone, including Argyle, a new chief engineer, because fuck knows what happened to the last one. But along with Kaczynski is an alien assistant who Riker recognises as coming from some remote, far distant planet. He seems quiet and unassuming, but Troy is concerned because she can't sense anything from him, and it's like he's literally not there. In engineering, Kaczynski continues to be an utter twat and starts giving orders, but Riker isn't having any of that shit and starts being a sassy fucker, demanding he explain what he's going to do or he won't get to perform his tests. Kaczynski reluctantly complies and proceeds to spout a serious amount of pseudo bullshit that would rival any corporate seminar. Meanwhile though, Kaczynski's assistant is sitting at another console, and Wesley, who's working on a school project, because that totally worked out well the last time he was in engineering with a school project, is curious what the assistant is up to. This strange alien seems to sense something interesting about Wesley and starts asking him questions to see what he thinks of Kaczynski's bullshit, and seems very impressed by his answers. Kaczynski meanwhile has finished his seminar, so Riker and Argyle start talking about him as if he's not there, and it's clear they both think this is all bullshit, but Argyle says he sees no reason not to let him try because he thinks nothing is going to happen anyway. On the bridge, Worf reports that we're good to go, so Picard gives the order to engage. Things seem to start off well enough, but the assistant gets distracted briefly by his interest in Wesley, causing an alarm to go off and Kaczynski to panic. The assistant starts to partially disappear and the warp core starts having a serious fit, and then suddenly the Enterprise is accelerating past warp 10. Oh fuck, I hope the crew don't turn into salamanders because I really don't need to be reminded of that episode. Picard orders a full stop and a report on their position. It looks like the Enterprise has ended up leaving the galaxy, going nearly 3 million light years away, and LaForge calculates at maximum warp it'll take them over 300 years to get back, highlighting just how inconsistent warp speeds are in this universe, when the USS Voyager could take 70 years to travel 70,000 light years, but Kirk's Enterprise can travel to the centre of the galaxy in just a few hours. Kaczynski, back in complete twat mode, takes credit for this feat of engineering and wants the new speed scale to be named after him. Picard though is more interested to know if Kaczynski can pull it off again and get them home. With just a hint of doubt he says yes of course, and that he'll just do whatever he did again and heads back off to engineering. Picard invites comment from the rest of the bridge crew. Worf isn't tolerant of people making mistakes and he thinks they shouldn't be allowed to try again. But Data shows off his Starfleet credentials by suggesting that they should explore the area while they have the opportunity, because no one else has been out this far before. Picard is tempted but thinks at the end of the day it's best to try and see if they can repeat the last test and get home first before using it to explore strange new worlds. Back in engineering, Wesley is concerned about the assistant, who clearly looks exhausted by what's happened, and goes to try and tell Riker what happened during the test, but Riker isn't interested and says he'll talk about it later. Kaczynski tells the assistant to get back to his station, but Wesley is protective and tries to tell him to fuck off, which he almost happily does, but the assistant says it's okay and that he's ready to try. So once again the test begins, but this time it's clear something isn't working right and Kaczynski starts to panic and the assistant starts phasing out again, but this time Riker notices what's going on. The warp core freaks out again and the Enterprise starts going crazy fast, shaking her way past multiple galaxies before Picard orders another stop. He then stares out at the view screen in shock. The Enterprise is now in some vast blue soup with pretty lights dancing around it, and he asks where the fuck are we, prompting Data to quote the episode's name. Apparently they've now moved over 1 billion light years away to an area of space that's completely outside their normal understanding. Picard decides to go down to engineering himself to find out just what the fuck happened, and then the weird shit starts happening. Worf sees a ball that has a shitty fake coat with horns on it that used to be his pet dog, reminding Jarl about her own pet kitty cat whilst avoiding the rape gangs of her home planet. Picard meanwhile almost steps out of the turbolift into the gaping maw of space before everything goes back to normal, and then ends up meeting his dead mother sitting in a corridor having tea. Other random crew members are also doing or seeing strange shit, with one guy clearly enjoying himself playing Mozart and another having some fun doing ballet. As Picard tries to talk to his mother, Riker interrupts him, but it makes him realise that thoughts are becoming a reality, so calls a red alert. And then once in engineering, he tells the crew to try and concentrate on only their duties and to not let their thoughts wander. Whilst Dr. Beverly examines the unconscious assistant, Kaczynski looks like he's shitting himself, and rightly so, because Riker tells Picard it was the assistant all along doing the modifications. He also explains that Wesley tried to tell him but that he ignored him, and now because of that the situation is worse. Wesley tells them what he saw the first time, and Dr. Beverly says that she thinks the assistant is dying, which concerns Picard because without him they'll be trapped in this funky region of space. In sickbay, Dr. Beverly continues to examine the assistant but can't figure out what's wrong with him. So she revives him and Picard starts demanding some answers. The assistant says he's basically an interdimensional version of a backpacker, and trades his abilities for wandering around on starships whilst looking for cool things to see. Riker asks why they haven't met their kind before, which is strange because at the very start he seemed to know exactly where he came from. The Traveller explains that up until this point humans were boring as fuck and it's only now that they've piqued his interest. He also says that humans really shouldn't be in this area of space until their distant future, until they can learn to control their thoughts, emphasising the danger that they're in. Picard asks if he can get them home and he promises to do his best, but before that happens he wants to have a private chat with Picard. He explains that he thinks Wesley is basically the next Mozart, and people like him are the real reason why he travels, and so wants Picard to help encourage him but not to interfere or tell Wesley or anyone else about this. The Traveller is clearly weakening though, so Picard gets Riker to help him down to engineering before they run out of time. Back on the bridge, Picard calls the crew again and asks them to direct their thoughts on keeping the Traveller all safe and warm. The Traveller even invites Kaczynski back by saying he'll need his help, which humbles the previously complete and utter twat. This makes Troy seem to get off slightly on the enormous sense of well-being that starts permeating the ship before Picard gives the order to engage. Everyone concentrates on their tasks, but it looks like it's not working and the Traveller is clearly struggling. So Wesley gives him some moral support and holds his hand, which seems to give the Traveller the strength he needs to focus and finally start doing his thing. As the Enterprise starts speeding away, the Traveller once again starts phasing out and eventually completely vanishes, but just in time to get the Enterprise all the way home and back to where they started. Everyone is relieved and Riker arrives to report that everything seems good, but the Traveller is gone. Picard calls the crew to thank them for their efforts before getting Riker to tell Wesley to report to the bridge. Literally 10 seconds later, Wesley arrives. Fuck me, that was fast. I mean, I know they're called turbo lifts, but he was in engineering a moment ago, so just how fast do those things go? Picard thanks Wesley for his help and invites him to sit down, but Riker protests, saying it's against his standing orders. So they engage in some bants before Picard opens his log and gives Wesley a commission of acting ensign. Okay, finally we have an episode which I enjoyed the whole way through. Again, it's by no means perfect, but I found the story and concepts within it quite interesting. It really felt like the crew were starting to get comfortable in their roles and play off each other better, and Wesley wasn't even annoying. In fact, I'm going to start off with Wesley right now. It's fair to say that he's an oft-maligned character in the Trek franchise, and frankly that is sometimes well earned. I mean, just look at The Naked Now. However, I don't really blame Will Wheaton for his portrayal of Wesley, but rather the awful writing that is often applied to him. Wheaton himself, I think, generally does a good job with the material he's given for such a young actor of the time, and he does what he can with it. In this episode, I found him quite acceptable, not being insufferable, saving the crew at the last minute, or making everyone else look stupid. But just being more in the background, watching the Traveller trying to help earnestly where he can, protective of his new friend. The crew often dismissing him somewhat makes sense given his general youth and inexperience and, to be fair, how he fucked things up for everyone in The Naked Now. But did they really need to keep referring to him disparagingly as the boy? The series so far keeps making the point of how smart Wesley seems to be, and this episode addresses that head on with the Traveller's keen interest in him and recognising his genius. His talk to Picard about encouraging this genius ends with Picard making Wesley an acting ensign, beginning his arc of becoming a Starfleet officer, and I felt this was actually a pretty decent and fairly natural progression of trying to make Wesley grow as a character and give him something useful to do beyond just hanging around the adults, annoying them, and us by extension. I surprise myself saying this because all I generally remember is him being annoying and the various shut up Wesley memes. But I'm trying to be a critical reviewer this time, so I'm doing my best to look at the characterization on an episode by episode basis and to be as fair as I can be. I guess we'll see as the series progresses if this viewpoint will hold up over time. The Traveller is an interesting character and I quite liked how he was portrayed. At first he's just mostly there in the background with Troy alluding to his strange nature, as it's Kaczynski who really has our attention by being a completely punchable and insufferable twat. It's only once shit hits the fan do we start focusing our attention on him. He comes across as quite friendly, but with a decent otherworldly attitude to him, especially when he's in sickbay explaining who he is and what he does. There's a faint whiff of that now very familiar TOS trope of yet another super powerful being once again interfering in the affairs of humanity, but this time feels very different because he is in no way portrayed as an antagonist to the crew and is in fact very apologetic for his inadvertent mistake that caused the ship to end up where it is, doing his best to help everyone out and return the crew to their original position. I also quite like the idea of these benevolent higher level beings wandering around and exploring, looking for other gifted beings that they can interact with. It's just nice to finally have our first friendly alien species that wasn't being a twat to the crew. Instead, the twat in this episode comes in the form of Kaczynski, who from the very first moment we see him makes us want to punch him repeatedly to wipe that smug superior look off his smarmy face. I guess I have to give credit to the actor here because he sells it very well. It's quite enjoyable when Riker manages to take some wind out of his sails initially by refusing to simply go along with his plans, especially when he tries to suggest he go over his head and talk to Picard. Riker's just not having any of it, and it's great, it's fun. And I like it when characters like this come up against someone that doesn't just roll over when they're told to. I also like though that Kaczynski does realise that it wasn't his genius in the end, and he genuinely looks terrified when it appears he screwed up, and whilst he doesn't fully redeem himself or anything, by the end of the episode he's doing his part to help the Traveller take them back to their own galaxy. I do wonder though, what branch of Starfleet is he with? I mean, he's wearing a normal uniform but is lacking a comm badge, and the rank insignia he has isn't the normal little round pips you see on the neck, but is something we've never seen before and will never see again. However, the big disappointment in this episode comes from the strange part of space the crew ends up in. I really love the concept of thought being the basis of reality and how one's thought can alter that perception, something that quantum mechanics deals with. And I like the idea that far out in the universe is some area of space that's so vastly different and alien we truly cannot comprehend, but unfortunately it's not implemented all that well here. I realise there's a limited budget and effects for what you can really do given it's 1987, but most of the random manifestations we see are very mundane, unimaginative and uninteresting. The only exception here is when Picard was stepping out of the turbolift into nothing but the blackness of space. That genuinely looked like a terrifying moment, but after a few minutes of scenes depicting these strange events, they suddenly stop and are largely forgotten about, and it does make me wonder, just how is the Enterprise not totally fucked already? Let me explain. These manifestations start initially happening very quickly, but bear in mind there are some 1,000 people aboard the Enterprise, so how is the ship not completely overrun by the random thoughts of everyone becoming reality? I bet some people are already feeling a bit freaked out by just looking out the window and seeing where they are, and when strange shit starts happening all around you, that usually ends up freaking out more people and snowballing into a general panic. And I can imagine, given that there are children on the ship, that being even more terrifying with the thoughts that they may end up manifesting. Really what I'm trying to say is that some of the crew should probably be dead, or the ship should have been rendered inoperable, or even end up destroyed by the reality-bending space they're occupying. But whatever, maybe I'm just thinking about this too much. In the last Outpost review, I mentioned that I felt like we still had some way to go before the crew felt more comfortable in their roles, and I have to take that back slightly because for the first time since we began, it does actually feel like the crew is starting to gel together better, particularly the relationship between Picard and Riker. There's a better sense of the actors getting to grips with their characters. Picard, for example, is not as shouty and irritable as when he first started, and is feeling a bit more like the Picard of later seasons. There's a couple of little nice non-verbal moments between Data and LaForge, and I really liked the scene where, after their first jump forward, Picard discusses with the crew their options of what to do, and Data suggests staying a bit to explore, being the embodiment of the Starfleet ideal of exploring strange new worlds. We also get a new chief engineer for the episode called Argyle, but he'll only appear in one more episode and then, like McDougal from The Naked Now, is never seen or heard from again. I am noticing just how underwhelming Yar is as a character, and I can see why Denise Crosby ended up feeling as she did and leaving the show towards the end of the season. She just doesn't really impress me in any of her scenes and isn't really given much to do. Likewise, it feels like the writers just don't know what to do with Worf yet, and we've had pretty much no character development for him yet just beyond him being a Klingon. It is, however, one of the rare times we see Worf smile, and damn, that's an ugly smile. In conclusion then, a fairly decent and interesting episode overall, though still a long way off from being great TV. Next time, the crew deal with some shitty squabbling aliens and a strange entity starts taking over the ship in the episode Lonely Among Us. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe and share. This has been Jay Warden, signing off.